Hello, thank you for being here and welcome back. I'm going to be reading a continuation of The Darkness to help you relax and fall asleep. That evening, Dia gazed out the living room window. The last bit of light faded away. The quiet, still energy of the night emerged, and soon darkness arrived. Mark should be here any minute, she thought. And that's when the doorbell rang. She rushed to answer the door. She stood aghast when she saw Steve standing right next to Mark. Dia began to tremble as fear and shock ran through her entire body. They both walked in. "What's he doing here?" she said, frightened. "I'm happy to see you too, little princess," Steve said, smiling. He looked alluring and provocative in a short-sleeved, dark blue shirt and black pants. His shirt sleeves cut off right where his biceps bulged. His dark, wavy hair was tousled in a well-put-together way. Mark looked just as enticing as something was different about him. That very moment, Sean appeared and said in a deep, gravelly voice, "Mark, have you lost your mind?" Mark stared at them apathetically without even blinking. "I ran into him on my way out, and I thought, what's the harm in listening? Are we going to run away from him forever? Let me hear what he has to say," Mark said in a monotone voice. Steve had a big grin on his face. "Thank you, Mark," he said, staring at Mark like he was a puppet. "Try that with me. I bet you it won't work," Sean said, clenching his fists. His voice seemed to come from his chest and not his mouth. Sean grabbed Steve and shoved him towards the door. But Steve laughed when he did that. Then he hit Sean with his right elbow, burning him in the process. "No, stop it," Dia screamed breathlessly. She stood in between them. Steve put both hands up defensively. "What did you do to him?" Dia asked, pointing at Mark. Mark stood there emotionless, with his mouth slightly open. Steve laughed quietly to himself. "I'm not going to let you take her," Sean said, moving Dia behind him. "I know. How can we come to some agreement? Because I'm not going to let the three of you disappear with her either," Steve murmured. He stared into Sean's eyes, then said, "You love her." "I do," Sean said. "Interesting," Steve said quietly and looked at Dia. She hid further behind Sean. "Dia, I don't want you to be scared of me. Let's come to a resolution. I'll tell you what, you stay here tonight. Then tomorrow you return to your home. She can live with you, but I need to be able to spend time with her whenever I want," Steve demanded. "You have to let us know when you're going to stop by first," Sean said. "All right, I'll stop by tomorrow afternoon, once you all settle back in." "Try this again and the deal's off," Steve said. Sean nodded. Dia wondered if he had agreed in such a hurry because he wanted to get rid of Steve. Well, I'm glad we could come to some sort of arrangement, Steve added. Dia sighed and rolled her eyes. It was like watching parents fight over custody of a child. Goodbye, little princess. See you tomorrow, Steve told Dia. Then walked over to Mark and whispered something in his ear. Mark blinked multiple times in a row, snapping out of it. Then Steve was gone. What happened? Mark calmly asked, scratching his forehead. Steve was here. You were completely under his influence. How did he get inside your head like that? Sean asked. I'm not sure. I think it was because I had a lot of her blood in my system, Mark said quietly, looking at Dia. Oh, so now you're blaming this on me, Dia burst out. As she began storming away, she thought of Steve's words. Did you mean what you told him? She asked Sean. With all my heart, Sean answered. Dia smiled at him, then walked away. What is she talking about? Mark asked. Sean looked away for a moment and stared at the wall. Sean, Mark shouted. Nothing. Steve made some demands, Sean said. He explained everything Steve had said, and how he threatened to take Dia if they moved. Mark's face hardened, and he was silent for a moment. All of a sudden, Jay walked in, drying his hair with a towel. What was all this screaming about? I was trying to take a shower, he said. They briefed him on what had just occurred. Jay threw both arms down, then grabbed a beer from the fridge. This sucks, he said, after taking a few gulps. This happened because you let your guard down. So how did Dia taste yesterday? Was it worth all of this? He said, firmly looking at Mark. Absolutely none of this would have happened if you hadn't gone and killed that girl, Mark fired back. You shouldn't have been forcing me to marry her in the first place, Sean said sharply. While they were pointing fingers and arguing downstairs, Dia was upstairs getting ready for bed. She stepped out of the shower and wrapped a towel around her body. She stood by the large bedroom windows, gazing out as she detangled her wet hair. The bedroom had a view of the back terrace, which had a beautiful sitting area surrounded by flowers. And then, past that, there were trees, many of them forming a thick wall. Right next to that, standing in front of the trees, appeared a shadow figure. She squinted her eyes. There was very little light, and it was hard to see. Once she focused her gaze and realized this was a familiar shadow, one she had seen before. She panicked. She leaped back from the windows, shuddering. Then in her mind, she heard a voice that echoed in her thoughts. Throughout that night and following day, it said, "You are mine."